could be the end of Spider-Man.
I was 9 years old when Spider-Man 3 came out. I'd seen the first two films hundreds of times, so I was giddy with anticipation for the final chapter of Sam Raimi's trilogy. I remember spending the whole day riding around on my bike thinking about it while I waited for my parents to take me to the cinema. And when I got there and the lights went down, I was blown the fuck away. I thought it was the greatest movie ever made, but contemporary critics did not agree with me. Roger Ebert called Spider-Man 3 a mess. The New Yorker's Anthony Lane called it a shambles. Manohla Dargis of the New York Times wrote that the film mostly just plods. Robert Walonsky of the Dallas Observer dismissed it as overstuffed, overlong, and undercooked. And Richard Roper wrote, for every slam-bang action sequence, there are far too many sluggish scenes. Scott Foundas of LA Weekly wrote that parts of Spider-Man 3 smell like rotted leftovers from Fantastic Four. Ouch.
Yeah, listen, you were great. That's a critic. This is something you're gonna have to get used to.
In a 2014 interview, Raimi himself said he thought Spider-Man 3 was awful. As I've gotten older, I've re-evaluated my initial assessment that Spider-Man 3 is the greatest movie ever made. The moments that stick out the most are when Peter gets corrupted by the symbiote. The black Spidey suit looks really cool and reads really well on camera, but Peter himself as a dancing, chauvinistic emo is pretty painful to watch. I understand the conception of it. Peter is a really dorky, goofy guy, so it makes sense that in his venomized bad boy form, he'd be the dorkiest, goofiest bad boy you've ever seen. But in execution, it's the definition of cringe.
Now dig on this.
The inclusion of Venom at all was arguably a fundamental flaw that prevented the threequel from living up to its two predecessors. The Harry Osborn amnesia subplot felt like something out of a bad soap opera, and the Mary Jane love story had completely run out of steam by this point, subsisting on romance cliches and manufactured drama. It's not a good sign when one of the most pivotal scenes in the romantic arc is stolen by Bruce Campbell cameoing as a nameless waiter. But even with all these problems, Spider-Man 3 isn't abhorrent enough to earn its reputation as one of the worst superhero movies ever made. I'm not here to tell you that Spider-Man 3 is a great film, or even a particularly good film. I'm just here to tell you it's not that bad. Sure, it's flawed, but it has plenty of redeeming qualities to make up for those flaws, or at least distract from them. Tobey Maguire continues to bring his all to the quintessential on-screen portrayal of Peter Parker, even if the symbiote storyline gives him a lot of really weird stuff to work with. Spider-Man 3 also has possibly the greatest Stan Lee cameo of all time. While Peter is enjoying a Times Square display about Spidey's heroics, a smiling Stan Lee joins him and says, "You know, I guess one person can make a difference," which both sums up the thesis of Lee's hugely influential superhero stories and describes the legacy of Lee himself, who used comics about caped crime fighters to inspire generations of readers to do the right thing. He even signs off with his Stan's soapbox catchphrase, "Nuff said."
You know, I guess one person can make a difference. Enough said.
Regardless of what you think of the plot of Spider-Man 3, you have to admit that it has some of the most exhilarating action sequences of any comic book movie. At the time of its release, Spider-Man 3 was the most expensive movie ever made, and Raimi put that money to good use. One set piece in particular, in which a malfunctioning crane bashes into a skyscraper and Spidey swoops through flying chunks of debris to save Gwen Stacy from plummeting to her death, is truly breathtaking.
Coming back!
It's masterfully directed. You have a clear sense of the scope and the stakes and the geography. You always know exactly what's going on and where everyone is. And on top of that spatial clarity, it's just a tense, terrifying situation you can imagine happening in real life. The biggest complaint about Spider-Man 3 is that it has too many villains. Too many cooks spoil the broth, and too many villains spoil Spider-Man 3. When Raimi was conceptualizing Spider-Man 3, he only wanted 2 villains. He wanted to turn Harry into the Hobgoblin as the natural progression of his arc from the previous films, and he wanted the Sandman to bring the Uncle Ben storyline full circle. But Avi Arad, the genius executive behind the Ben Affleck Daredevil movie, the Nicolas Cage Ghost Rider movie, and that Spider-Man villain universe that seems to have been unleashed by Satan to cause untold suffering on Earth, forced Raimi to include Venom, because that's the executive mindset. He didn't stop to consider whether Venom had a place in this story. He just thought, people like Venom, we must have Venom, give me Venom. Executives aren't creative, but they like to think they are, and since they're in charge of the money, they can override the creative judgment of someone who's actually creative like Sam Raimi instead of just staying the fuck out of the way. So Raimi begrudgingly wrote Venom into the script, and arguably all the film's biggest problems stem from that. It overstuffed the plot and took time away from the stories Raimi actually wanted to tell. Cramming in too many villains, not giving any of them enough time to develop or make an impression, would become a common problem with superhero films going forward. Aquaman, Green Lantern, The Dark Knight Rises, Iron Man 2, Batman v Superman, Sony themselves even made the same mistake again with The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Without Venom, Spider-Man 3 wouldn't have any of the scenes with cringy emo Peter Parker, which may have been a meme goldmine but lost the film a significant amount of brownie points. There is one bright side to Venom's inclusion. The symbiotes are pure Raimi. He has a lot of fun visualizing the black alien goo that possesses the people it attaches to and corrupts their soul. It's very Evil Dead. Raimi's live-action Venom symbiote scared the shit out of me as a kid. I won't deny that Spider-Man 3 has plenty of glaring flaws that are hard to overlook, but there's actually a slightly better version of the film that softens some of those flaws. It's difficult to get a hold of because Sony has never released it on its own, so you have to invest in obscure Blu-ray box sets in order to find it. But there's an editor's cut of Spider-Man 3 that reduces Venom's role and focuses more on Peter's journey. On the whole, it doesn't alter as much of the movie as it was hyped up to, but there are a few key changes that make it worth checking out. Editor Bob Murawski worked on all 3 Spider-Man movies, won an Oscar for editing The Hurt Locker, and later reteamed with Raimi for Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Murawski was apparently dissatisfied with Raimi's vision for Spider-Man 3 and went on to cut together his own version. The editor's cut was released in 2017 to coincide with the 10th anniversary of the theatrical cut. Clocking in at 137 minutes, 2 minutes shorter than the theatrical version, the editor's cut shuffles around the structure, extends one sequence, removes a handful of particularly egregious scenes, adds 3 new ones from the cutting room floor, and swaps out 3 other scenes for alternate versions. Murawski also features a couple of previously unused tracks from Christopher Young's musical score. The changes aren't all that noticeable at first glance, but the viewing experience feels different. The best thing about the editor's cut is that it curbs all the worst parts of the movie while putting more of a spotlight on what does work. Emo dancing aside, the arc of Peter Parker becoming corrupted, losing the values that Uncle Ben instilled in him, and ultimately returning to a life of heroism is a compelling story journey. With less flab in the editor's cut, it's easier to appreciate that transformative journey. Topher Grace was woefully miscast as Venom. Instead of playing Eddie Brock as an eccentric reporter who bonds with a bloodthirsty symbiote and tries to keep a moral center as an anti-hero, Grace played him as a smarmy, vindictive arsehole who didn't need any extraterrestrial influence to become a monster. Mercifully, Murawski limits Eddie's role in the editor's cut to the scenes that are strictly necessary for the plot development, and excises the rest.
You want forgiveness? Get religion.
What's going on here?
We're just horsing around.
While Venom is a fan favorite, at least in comic book form, and Harry Osborn is more crucial to the larger trilogy arc, the most compelling villain in Spider-Man 3's overstuffed plot is the Sandman. He may not have the most exciting powers, but Flint Marko is a classic example of a villain who's hard to root against because his motivations are understandable. The only reason he robs banks is to pay for his terminally ill daughter's treatments. A parent would do anything for their child, and Marko embodies that. He's a quintessential sympathetic villain. He does bad things for good reasons. The editor's cut leans into this aspect more. One of the most noteworthy deleted scenes that Murawski fished off the cutting room floor sees Marko's daughter and her mom hanging out at a park. Marko watches from afar and appears to his daughter in the form of a giant, extravagant sandcastle. His daughter wanders over to the sandcastle and it makes her feel genuinely happy for a brief moment. It allows her to escape her miserable existence and enjoy some whimsy. And then the sandcastle disappears and a conflicted Marko reluctantly takes off. The visuals are a bit bizarre, but it's a touching scene that deepens Marco's connection to his estranged daughter and hammers home his good intentions. The theatrical cut actually does a really good job of setting this up. We see that Marco is just a concerned dad trying to do right by his kid the only way he knows how from the moment we meet him. His transformation into the Sandman is both gorgeously rendered by the VFX team and a beautiful piece of visual storytelling by Raimi. The subtle but heartbreaking image of Marco trying and failing to pick up a locket containing his daughter's picture tells us everything we need to know about the tragedy of this character. Thomas Hayden Church gives a fantastic performance. You'd expect Uncle Ben's killer to be the most hated character in the trilogy, but Marco's remorse really resonates emotionally. I love that Uncle Ben subplot too. It retcons the first film a bit, but by reopening the case, it brings the trilogy full circle. Captain Stacy calls Aunt May and Peter down to the police station to tell them that a second person was involved in Ben's murder, Flint Marco. Not only does this create a personal connection between Peter and Marco, there's also a deep dramatic resonance in Peter realizing he let the wrong man fall to his death, reckoning with that guilt, and ultimately finding it within himself to forgive Marco.
I forgive you.
We never really got closure on Uncle Ben's untimely demise, but this gave us, and Peter, some semblance of closure.
Mr. Sandman, bring us, please, 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 Mr. Sandman, bring us our
Topher Grace's miscasting and the soapy Harry Osborn amnesia storyline and the dig on this dance scene can all be difficult to overlook. But there's a lot to love in Spider-Man 3. You get Tobey Maguire at his most committed, you get a wonderfully sympathetic Sandman, you get a touching ode to the power of forgiveness, and you get Stan Lee saying "'Nuff said." The fact that its two predecessors were genre-defining masterpieces certainly didn't help. The bar was set so high that there was no way the third movie could live up to it. It was set up to fail. The same thing happened with the Godfather trilogy, the Matrix trilogy, the original Star Wars trilogy, the Dark Knight trilogy, the Mad Max trilogy, basically every trilogy. The Toy Story, Lord of the Rings, Dollars and Before trilogies are the only trilogies that ever managed to avoid this. But while Spider-Man 3 definitely doesn't deserve to be in the masterpiece conversation with the first two films, I do think it deserves to be viewed in a more favourable light. It often gets lumped in with the likes of Catwoman, Fant4stic, Green Lantern, Dark Phoenix, Batman and Robin, and the first Suicide Squad. But it has so much more going for it than any of them. That crane sequence alone saves it from that compost heap.
They love me.
Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you liked the video. Remember to like and subscribe and click on the little bell. And also seize the day and call your mom and be kind to yourself.